Harley Earl was probably the most influential man in American automobile design.
A lot of people share the spotlight, but don't kid yourself. Bill Mitchell was the driving force.
Everybody will light up when you say Zorar has done talking.
It has been said that the trick to designing the next generation Corvette is to never completely erase the one before it. If you look closely at the C7 Stingray, you will indeed find lines that can be traced all the way back to a sketch drawn 60 years ago by our first inductee into the 2017 Corvette Hall of Fame, Mr. Peter Brock. From an early age, Peter dreamed of racing cars, not designing them. Yet even then, he saw race cars as works of art that moved.
My real goal was to be a race driver. I mean, that was the neat thing, because I hung around with racing cars and race drivers and had seen the whole sport begin to grow there on the West Coast.
When racing proved to be a dream that was too expensive for him to chase, his natural ability as an artist led him down another path to the Art Center College of Design.
I went down to Los Angeles. I'd heard about a school down there that was teaching people how to design cars. And walked in the morning and literally walked around the classes and sat in and listened to some of the instructors and looked at all the stuff on the walls and decided that was really where I wanted to go to school. I went up to the front office and I said, you know, I've decided I want to go to school here. How do, you know, where do I sign? And the very nice lady at the desk, you know, she said, well, this is a school for professionals. And she said, well, do you understand you have to bring in a portfolio? And I said, what's a portfolio? I mean, I was really naive. I had no idea, completely green. I had no art background at all. And she said, you'll have to bring in, you know, some work and we'll have that take before the board and see if you're approved to come here. So I said, well, you know, all I know is I want to do that stuff that's up on the walls there. So I walked out the door, went out to my car in the back and pulled out my 3-ring binder, you know, with the blue lines on it, and drew all the cars that I knew that I used to draw in study hall. And just before closing, I went back in and presented it to the lady. She was surprised to see me. And I said, well, will these do? You know, she just kind of smiled. And I literally talked my way in there. I got in there and had fabulous instructors there, Strother McMinn and George Jurgensen. These were ex-guys out of Detroit, and just fabulous instructors. And I got as much help from them as I did my fellow students, you know, because I was really playing catch up. And I'd already knew that I wanted to go to GM and work on the design stuff there, because GM was really leading what was going on in design at that time. So I got to know Chuck Jordan at that time. Chuck was a headhunter for GM styling. So he was coming out every semester and I got to know him, and he'd seen some of my work, and I told him my desire that, you know, when I got out of school, I intended to come back to GM and look for a job, and he said, yeah, well, come and see me.
When Bill Mitchell took over as head of design from the legendary Harley Earl, he wanted to make his own indelible mark on the automotive world. Corvette would be completely redesigned.
I think it was the late summer, he'd gone over to Turin Auto Show. So the main thing that was showing over there were a bunch of little streamliners, but they were all these beautiful little shapes. You know, they had a real crisp belt line going all the way around and a small little aerodynamic shape over each one of the wheels. One of these cars had already gone into production, which was the Alfa Romeo Disco Volante, and was getting tremendous amount of press and coverage on in the media in Europe. So he realized that this was a theme that had been publicly accepted, and he took a lot of pictures. So when he came back to GM in '57 and had this dream about building the new Corvette, that was his theme that he wanted to do. But anyway, he came downstairs, walked in, you know, like he owned the place, which he did, and just said, hey fellas, come on over here, sit down, I want to talk to you. And You know, we of course recognized him from photographs and stuff, and we were really impressed that Bill Mitchell wanted to talk to us. He says, you know, I want to show you kids something. And he pulls out this stack of photographs that he had in his pocket and laid them out on the desk. And there were all these pictures of all these little streamliners and the Disco Volante Alfa Romeo. And he says, you know, I want to work on a brand new Corvette. And as you probably know, the whole Corvette program has been cut off. We aren't doing any performance cars around here at all. But I'd like to do a concept. I'd like to think about the future. So he said, I like this theme that's here. We've got a very crisp belt line all the way around the side of the car. We've got these little shapes over the wheels and stuff, and I want to do a coupe, and that's the direction I'd like to go. Other than that, it's up to you guys. Let's see what you can do. So I'm going to be back in a few days, and put your best work up on the wall, and we'll take a look at it. And we're absolutely blown away that he's asked us to design the new Corvette. So we began to put all of our work up on the walls, and we had the walls really papered. So by the time he came back next time, he looked around the walls, you know, very quietly, and then he began to walk around the room. And he walked around looking at everything very, very carefully, and then he began to make a second lap, and he came back to one of the drawings was up on the wall, and he said, who did this drawing here? And I looked over, and it was my drawing, and I raised my hand. He just lit up on it. Boy, he pulled it down off the wall, and he said, yeah, this is the direction I want to go for a new Corvette. This is going to be the direction. And it's interesting to look at that sketch today because it hasn't changed. You know, this is November '57, and all of the iterations that we went through, we had to please everybody. We had to please Ed Cole, but Mitchell loved this particular design. And then came back in and said, okay, you know, the next stage is we're going to do a scale model on the thing. And I was pretty excited at that because now we're going to get in to do it in 3 dimensions. Ended up working with the modelers, and these guys turned out to be the greatest group of guys I'd ever worked with. Mitchell would come in all the time just to see what was coming along with the models and encourage all of us to continue to, you know, work on this particular theme. And then he came in with the big news, and the big news was that he was able to buy the SS chassis, and explained that that was going to be the chassis that we would build a new Corvette on. Management had pretty much discovered what Mitchell was going to do with this new Corvette, and they said, you know, if you really intend to run this car, you know, you're going to have to do it on your own. You cannot put the Chevrolet name on it, and you cannot put the Corvette name on it. We are out of racing. So Mitchell invented the name Stingray for this new car. At that point, my Roadster, the XP87, got moved upstairs, and the project was then turned over to Tony Lapine and Larry Shinoda. You know, when people ask, you know, who really designed the C2 Corvette, Bill Mitchell designed it. We were the interpreters for it.
While the final look of the second generation Corvette is rightfully credited to Bill Mitchell and Larry Shinoda, you can't miss the design direction that began with Peter's drawings and the clay models that followed. Perhaps that is why car designers even today look back on Peter's work for inspiration.
The most iconic Corvette we have at GM Design, the most revered Corvette we have at GM Design, is the 1959 Stingray show car. And we have pictures of that car all through our hallways, conference rooms. It has been the absolute most timeless Corvette, some would tell you, ever done. And I think a lot of that goes back to obviously Peter Brock's sketches, and that, you know, there's a gesture, there's a feel, there's a sense of line work and spirit in those drawings that is just so key to that car. And each time we tackle a new generation of Corvette, we're usually measured up against the 59, which did turn into the 63 that influenced, you know, future production cars like his work really did.
All designers have a story about how a car or cars that kind of transformed their idea of where they wanted to work. For me, it was that Stingray. I saw that car and I knew I had to work where that car was done, no matter what. So his work sealed the deal for me. I knew I had to work at General Motors. The basic architecture of those forms, that form vocabulary, to this day still resonates with car designers around the world. I don't care who they are.
I like Peter. You would think he'd have the biggest ego in the world, given some of the projects that he has worked on, and I find a very different person than that. He's very quick to say, you know, Bill Mitchell designed that Stingray, you know, that he was a part of the team that worked on it. It's hard to call it a car because it's more than that. It embodies all the emotion and the passion of General Motors design. That car has had an influence on every single Corvette since then.
Peter would leave GM before the XP87 Stingray was completed and go on to design the World Championship winning Daytona Cobra for Carroll Shelby. He would then start Brock Racing Enterprises and enjoy further success by founding the world's largest hang gliding company. To Corvette fans and automobile historians, however, his groundbreaking work on the XP87 Stingray Racer will be forever revered and remembered.
When Peter's sketch was chosen out of many sketches by many different artists, his was the one that floated to the top. He was handpicked for his first sketch. It was so strong and so powerful to create the first Stingray. And so when Tom Peters and Kirk Bennion were charged with the C7, where did they go? Where did they go to create the next gen Corvette? They went to the most classic Corvette arguably ever created, the 63, Peter's sketch. When you look at those top fender lines, it may be subtle, but they are there. That 1963 Stingray is in the C7. And that 1963 Stingray, when you match it up to Peter's original sketch, is an awakening moment for anyone who wants to understand the impact that he's had on the Corvette.
For setting into motion the unmistakable look of Corvette that continues to this day, we welcome Peter Brock into the Corvette Hall of Fame.